I remember the exact moment I decided to retire. It wasn't because of a difficult case. It wasn't because I was too old to argue or because I had lost my passion for the law. It was a Tuesday afternoon, specifically, in the hallway of the family court district that I had walked through nearly every day for 40 years. I was standing there holding a briefcase heavy with the dissolution of a 20-year marriage. Down the hall, I saw a young couple. They were maybe 22, 23. They were holding hands, waiting for a marriage license. They were glowing. They had that specific, terrifying optimism that only exists before life has handed you your first subpoena. And right next to them, exiting courtroom 4B, was my client, a man who had just spent 3 years and $500,000 trying to prove that his wife was a narcissist. He had won the motion that day. He had secured the assets he wanted. But as he walked past that young couple, he didn't look like a winner. He looked like a ghost. He looked hollowed out by his own victory. That was the moment. I realized I had spent 4 decades watching people try to use the legal system to fix a broken heart. I had processed over 3,000 divorces. I had represented captains of industry, famous artists, teachers, mechanics, and people who had nothing left to their names but anger. I saw love die in every way imaginable. I saw it die with a scream, and I saw it die with a whimper. I saw it die over money, over infidelity, over boredom, and over the simple tragic fact that people change. But in all those years, in all those thousands of files, I noticed a pattern, a strange, counterintuitive anomaly that they don't teach you in law school. I noticed that the clients who won their cases, the ones who got the house, the dog, the full pension, and the vindication, were rarely the ones who ended up happy. 2 years later, 5 years later, they were often still bitter. They were still litigating the past in their heads. They were rich in assets, but bankrupt in peace. On the other hand, there was a very small group of people, maybe 5% of my clients, who did something different. Often, they walked away with less. They settled when they could have fought. They refused to engage in the mudslinging. My partners would sometimes look at their files and say, "We left money on the table." But those people, when I ran into them years later, looked younger. They looked lighter. They had found new love, new careers, new lives. They hadn't just ended a marriage. They had started something else. They didn't win the lawsuit. They reset the game. I am retired now. I don't bill by the hour anymore, which means I can finally tell you the truth. I can tell you the things I couldn't say when I was your attorney, bound by the duty to fight for every inch of ground. And the truth is this: the divorce is not the tragedy. The tragedy is staying in the wreckage after the building has fallen. If you are listening to this, you are likely in pain. You are standing at the edge of a cliff called the end, and you are terrified. You are worried about your finances. You are worried about your children. You are worried about what people will say. You are worried that you have failed. I am here to tell you that you haven't failed. You have just finished the first volume of your life. The question now is whether you are going to spend the rest of your life rereading that sad chapter, or if you are going to write a new one. This is what I call the heart reset. The heart reset is not a legal strategy. It is a survival strategy. It is the deliberate choice to prioritize your future peace over your past grievances. It sounds simple, but I can tell you from experience, it is the hardest thing a human being can do. Our instincts tell us to fight. When we are hurt, we want justice. We want the other person to pay. We want a judge to bang a gavel and declare that we were right and they were wrong. I had a client named Robert. That wasn't his real name, but his story is real enough. Robert was a CEO, a brilliant man, accustomed to controlling outcomes. When his wife left him, he treated the divorce like a hostile corporate takeover. He hired the most aggressive firm in the city. He wanted to depose her friends. He wanted to subpoena her emails going back a decade. He wanted to crush her. He told me it's not about the money, counselor. It's about the principle. Whenever a client tells me it is about the principle, I know I am about to buy a new boat with their legal fees. Principles are the most expensive luxury in family court. Robert fought for 3 years. The stress gave him an ulcer. He lost his relationship with his adult children because they couldn't stand to be around his toxicity. He spent $400,000 in legal fees. And in the end, he won. He got the result he wanted. He kept the vacation home. He limited her alimony. He proved his point. 3 years after the decree was finalized, I saw Robert at a steakhouse downtown. He was sitting alone. He waved me over. I expected him to be celebrating his freedom. Instead, he spent 45 minutes talking about his ex-wife. He was still obsessing over things she had said in 1998. He was a prisoner of his own victory. He had won the war, but he was still living on the battlefield, guarding a pile of rubble. Now, compare that to a woman I'll call Sarah. Sarah's situation was objectively worse. Her husband had left her for his secretary, a cliché so painful it feels like a bad joke. Sarah had every right to be furious. She had every right to burn the house down. But when she came to my office, she sat down, dried her eyes, and asked me a question I have never forgotten. She said, "Counselor, what is the fastest, most efficient way to get to the part where I am happy again?" She didn't ask how to punish him. She didn't ask how to maximize her payout. She asked how to maximize her future. We settled that case in 4 months. She took less than she could have gotten if we had gone to trial. She let him have the furniture. She let him have the car. She said, "I don't want his things. They smell like the past." 6 months later, Sarah sent me a postcard from Italy. She was renting a small apartment in Florence. She was learning to paint. She looked 20 years younger. She understood something Robert didn't. She understood that you cannot pay for a new life with the currency of the old one. She understood the first rule of the heart reset. Rule number 1, you cannot sue a memory. The legal system is a blunt instrument. It is designed to divide assets and debts. It is a calculator. It is not a therapist. It is not a priest. It cannot give you closure. It cannot give you an apology. It cannot make the other person understand how much they hurt you. I've watched people spend their life savings trying to force a court to validate their pain. They file motion after motion, hoping that if they just present enough evidence, the judge will look at them with pity and say, "You poor thing, you were right all along." That never happens. The judge looks at spreadsheets. The judge looks at the law. The judge does not care about your heart. The reset begins when you accept that justice, true, emotional justice, is a myth. You will likely never get the apology you deserve. The other person will likely never admit they were the villain. They will tell their friends that they were the victim. They will rewrite history, and you have to let them. You have to let them have their false narrative, because trying to correct it will cost you your sanity. You have to decide that your peace is more valuable than your rightness. You have to drop the lawsuit against the memory of who you thought they were. Rule number 2, don't bring a broken heart to a new dinner table. This is the mistake I saw most often in the immediate aftermath. The ink isn't even dry on the decree, and my clients were already on dating apps. They were terrified of the silence in their own homes. They were desperate to prove that they were still desirable, still lovable. They wanted to replace the missing person as quickly as possible. I call this bleeding on people who didn't cut you. When you end a long-term relationship, you are in a state of trauma. You are not yourself. You are a raw nerve. If you rush into a new connection, you are not looking for a partner. You are looking for a bandage. You are looking for an anesthetic. And that is unfair to you, and it is unfair to the new person. I had a client who married the first woman he dated after his divorce. He was terrified of being alone. He married her within 6 months. 2 years later, he was back in my office, divorcing her. Why? Because he hadn't married her. He had married the not being alone. Once the fear subsided, he realized he had nothing in common with this stranger. It had compounded his tragedy because he couldn't sit still with his own grief. The heart reset requires a period of solitude. It requires you to learn how to be alone without being lonely. It requires you to date yourself, go to the restaurant alone, go to the movie alone, sleep in the middle of the bed, relearn who you are when you aren't half of a we. When I was married to my work, I didn't know who I was without a case file in my hand. When I retired, I had to sit in my garden and figure out what I actually liked. It was terrifying, but it was necessary. You have to build a foundation of self-respect so solid that the next time you invite someone into your life, they are an addition, not a load-bearing wall. If you need someone to complete you, you are vulnerable. If you want someone to complement you, you are powerful. Rule number 3, protect the future. Now, this is where the romanticism ends, and the lawyer steps back in. If you are going to reset, and if you are going to eventually open your heart again, you must do it with your eyes wide open. I have seen people who were destroyed by a divorce swear they would never marry again, only to fall in love 5 years later and make the exact same mistakes. They didn't sign a prenup because they thought it was unromantic. They didn't keep their finances separate because they wanted to show trust. Let me be very clear. Marriage is a contract. It is the most significant financial contract you will ever sign. It overrides your will. It overrides your property rights. It changes your tax status. To treat it purely as a fairy tale is negligence. If you are lucky enough to find love again after a heart reset, protect it by protecting yourself. Sign the prenup. It is not a plan for failure. It is a seatbelt. You don't put on a seatbelt because you plan to crash. You put it on because you know that other drivers are unpredictable. Having clear financial boundaries actually helps the relationship. It takes the money off the table. It ensures that you are together for love, not for lifestyle. I have represented billionaires who didn't sign prenups, and I watched their empires crumble because they were too embarrassed to ask for a signature. And I have represented teachers who did sign them, and when the relationship ended, they walked away friends because the exit strategy was already written. The heart reset is about maturity. It is about understanding that love is beautiful, but life is practical. You can have a soft heart and a hard spine. You can be vulnerable and protected at the same time. In conclusion, I want you to look at your life right now. Look at the empty chair at the table. Look at the silence in the hallway. I know it feels like a void. I know it feels like something has been subtracted. But in physics, a vacuum creates space for something new to enter. You have a rare opportunity. Most people never get to live two lives. They live one life on a straight track from birth to death. You have been derailed. The train has come off the tracks. And as terrifying as that is, it means you are no longer bound by the schedule. You can go anywhere. You can move to the city you always talked about. You can take up the hobby your ex-spouse hated. You can dress the way you want. You can eat what you want. You can be who you want. I have seen clients find true love at 82 years old. I am not exaggerating. I handled a prenup for a couple in a retirement home. They were giddy. They were holding hands like teenagers. They had both been divorced. They had both been widowed. They had been through the grinder, but they had reset. They weren't bitter about the past. They were just grateful for the present. That can be you, but only if you do the work. Only if you stop litigating the past. Only if you stop trying to win the argument with a ghost. My name is not important. My face is a digital mask, chosen to protect the privacy of the thousands of people whose secrets I hold. But the wisdom is real. It was bought with millions of dollars of other people's money and tears. I am giving it to you because I don't want you to be Robert, sitting alone in a steakhouse, right about everything and happy about nothing. I want you to be Sarah. I want you to be on a balcony in Italy, or a porch in Ohio, or a park bench in London, breathing air that tastes like freedom. This is Heart Reset. We have a lot of work to do. We are going to talk about the narcissists. We are going to talk about the money. We are going to talk about the red flags I ignored in my own life, and the ones you probably ignored in yours. We are going to dissect the corpse of your relationship, not to mourn it, but to learn from it. Subscribe, because class is in session. And for the first time in your life, the only person you have to please is the one in the mirror. Let's get to work.